Lawyers of Reddit, what cases do you regret winning? Not sure how the case turned out, but the Innocence Project had a case where a man was convicted and sentenced to death. Turns out another man confessed to committing the crime to his lawyer at some point. Then the man who confessed died. So this innocent man was on death row. But this lawyer was still bound by attorney-client privilege even though his client was dead. If he publicly revealed his client's confession, he would be disbarred and his life would be ruined. And it still may not be enough to overturn the conviction. Pretty sure no lawyers felt good about that situation. Or at least I hope so. I really hope a judge figured out a way to get that man out of death row without ruining the lawyer's life. I'm a legal services attorney, which is essentially a public defender but for civil issues like housing and debt collection defense. So, I don't get to pick my clients. As you can imagine, I've represented quite the cast of characters. I haven't regretted winning anything, because this is what I've signed up for and I truly believe everyone deserves legal representation when they need it. But I certainly don't love all of my clients. The worst client I had was a monstrous, wife-beating junkie whose landlord was attempting to evict him after the cops came for the umpteenth time. I sympathized with the landlord and hated my asshole client, who called me a hunt no less than 15 times, but I prevented the eviction. Since the comments are still a graveyard, I'll pop in to say that although I'm not a lawyer, my dad is a criminal defense lawyer and he explains it like this. You don't regret any of the cases you win. Even the ones where you know, strongly suspect, you just helped a criminal go free. Because it's not about whether or not that criminal goes free. It's about ensuring every person's rights are upheld so that innocent people don't go to jail. You need to do every single thing you can for every client to make sure the prosecution doesn't get an easy win. The prosecutor needs to completely fulfill their burden of proof. Yeah, I'm sure there's some lawyers out there who helped murder hers go free who went on to murder kids or something. And I'm sure that eats at them. But for the most part, lawyers aren't defending their client. They're defending constitutional rights. Until we invent completely accurate lie detectors or psychics. That's the only way it works. I wouldn't say I regret representing any of my clients because I really do believe that you can't have a truly fair judicial system without permitting both sides, however unlikable, to have their story told and legal arguments presented, with a neutral judge or jury deciding the ultimate outcome. I disagree with the people who say that some people don't deserve representation. I mean, talk about a slippery slope. If we do have the evidence to rule against someone, let the person have his say and then trust that the judge or jury will do the right thing. If we don't have the evidence, well, then that person shouldn't be punished. I think the same general principles apply to civil law. Although the stakes are lower, I will say that I find dealing with juries in practice to be exceptionally frustrating. It's so obvious that some jury members make decisions based on emotion rather than on the law. For instance, in an employment dispute, your average Joe will 9x out of 10 feel more sympathy towards the worker rather than the huge corporation that employs him, regardless of the actual facts. It's the old David Goliath effect. We want to root for the likable person, for the little guy. But sometimes the little guy's actually in the wrong. And the big terrible company actually followed the law. This aspect of the law sucks because you end up having to include emotional appeal arguments that are really irrelevant to the ultimate legal issues. So I guess I dislike that aspect of the job. A really good friend of mine is a public defender. He was trying to prove his client was crazy to get him a lighter sentence. They had the client evaluated by a psychiatrist who did several interviews. In the 30-page document my buddy found the part where they asked about him. For some background, my friend is an alright looking guy and his hair is like the bad guy from Shrek, all long and flowy and he can't help but flip it a lot and it looks like it's in slow motion when he does. The psychiatrist asked, "What do you think of your public defender? I want to cut all his hair off and duck him." Guy was found insane and they won. Not a lawyer, but I think this story is relevant. One of my co-workers this past summer has this father that's a lawyer. Anyway, he had a pretty high profile case a few years ago, a drunk driver who held a teen local to where we worked. He kept the drunk driver out of jail. This was about 4-5 years ago. Anyway, my co-worker, not from the immediate area, but commuted from fairly far away, ends up meeting this guy on Tinder and is pretty excited about it for a few days. She mentions at least once a day for 3 or 4 days before that she's got a date with this guy. Anyway, the day of the date, she does some digging. Turns out the guy is the brother of the kid killed by the drunk driver. The one her dad kept out of jail. Whoops. Had a client who had been convicted of sexual assault and was just finishing up his prison sentence. The state was pushing to have him declared a chronic offender and have him civilly committed after he got out of prison. But he didn't quite meet the criminal history criteria. We won on that one. But less than a month later he was arrested for raping a prostitute addict. I don't regret representing him. The state should never be allowed to bend the rules on imposing a penalty as drastic as permanent civil commitment, but I do regret that the law didn't make adequate provision for dealing with guys like him. I'll also always wonder if the second victim wasn't a setup. I wonder if somebody in the county prosecutor's office didn't tell her what kind of history this guy had with teen and preteen girls, and offer her a get out of jail free card or meth out of the evidence locker or something if she helped stick him with a charge that would qualify him for permanent commitment. I'm a third-year law student but intern at a public defender office and hold a certificate from my state Supreme Court allowing me to practice. A lot of domestic violence cases get dismissed because the spouse recants and won't testify. After reviewing the client's file by reading the victim's statement and looking at photos of women with black eyes and bruised faces, and seeing the cheerful client happy his case is over just to probably beat her again next time, I feel a bit shitty. I have never regretted winning a case. I litigate patents, so there is not much in the way of moral value to the issues and most cases settle long before trial. There are two types of regret you can have about the case: that the client didn't deserve the outcome, morally, or that the outcome wasn't warranted, legally. In my experience, most matters will have at least a little of one. When I worked at a big firm, unsympathetic cases were par for the course. Who cares? Really? Whether this Fortune 500 bank or that one wins a $300 million case? But for most of us who are, or have been, in that line of work, that's not the reason we do it. The reason is that big cases like that tend to turn on interesting, intellectually satisfying issues. I can't get myself worked up over whether secured or unsecured creditors get paid first in a billion-dollar bankruptcy, but when the latter's claim turns on a clever quirk of bankruptcy law, or the former's on a creative separation of powers argument, well, now you have my attention. So there were a lot of cases that I might regret in that this bank or that bank just wasn't a sympathetic client. But if winning it advances the law as an intellectual pursuit, count me in. The hard ones are where you just don't have a good argument, meaning the intellectual challenge isn't there, or where the client's so reprehensible that the challenge doesn't matter. One of my best friends went to law school to be an environmental lawyer, for example, and wound up working on BP's side on the Deepwater Horizon case. SC doesn't talk about it much. It was a job and SC did it begrudgingly. Edit to add, thankfully I'm a prosecutor doing appeals now. So if there's a case I win and I regret it, I have to tell a judge. I know how much Reddit loves it when people answer even though they weren't addressed. So here I go. My husband used to do technical work for an expert witness. Worked a case where a disabled child rode his trike in front of a delivery truck and was injured. Defense was able to show that the driver was not at fault, was under speed limit, could not have stopped in time, etc. So the plaintiff lost. But the family was clearly struggling with the kid's needs and had been doing so long before the trike accident. The lawyer told the expert witness it was the kind of case you wouldn't mind losing, so the family could get some financial help. For me, it's the traffic infractions that I get dismissed for people who are repeat offenders, like multiple times in a year for speeding 10+. I appreciate their business, but I feel like I'm enabling them to speed. That being said, I'll keep on defending them as long as they keep paying me. There was a case on the local news in the last couple days where a former cop was caught stealing things from a couple different business. In one instance he was even caught on camera. Well, he was convicted and he waived his right to speedy trial, 180 days, and was supposed to complete some program. The program was longer than 180 days and the lawyer was not present when he waived his speedy trial rights, nullifying it. So the end result was the cop got off scot-free. They interviewed the lawyer and he seemed kind of sheepish about it. Many years ago, while practicing as a certified law student under the supervision of the public defender, got charges dismissed against a guy who was caught red-handed breaking tens of thousands of dollars worth of windows at the local public school. The case was tossed when the prosecution failed to introduce any evidence to prove that the public school was property of another. The ones where you don't get a lot of money. You're getting downvoted for this. But it can be a real issue. Sinking a ton of time into a case that doesn't result in much income can really damage a business. Didn't even realize I was getting downvoted. Apparently no one here works with lawyers. I don't think I will ever regret winning a case. If I win and it shouldn't have happened, someone else ducked up. I don't regret other people's mistakes. People hate lawyers. Until they need one. Then they become saviors. My lawyer is a Jewish pit bull. He is good at what he does. It's the guy on the other side that's a brick.